Welcome to the Lemons and Pineapples podcast. I'm your host, Emma O'Brien, personal development coach, HeartMath practitioner, dog photographer, and entrepreneur. In this podcast, I share tools, strategies, and amazing guest interviews to help you improve your mindset and your well-being with a sprinkle of fun and probably some mention of dogs along the way. So without further ado, let's squeeze the day. Hi folks, welcome to episode 53 of the podcast. Today I'm talking about why mindfulness is not enough when it comes to reducing stress. So don't get me wrong, before I jump in, I love mindfulness. I think it's a really powerful practice to cultivate present moment awareness. It's wonderful for using it as part of a meditative practice. It is a great way of being able to bring yourself into a space of gratitude. All of these things are really valuable for reducing stress and helping us feel better. Most of our stress is self-created, and it's created by flitting between thoughts of ruminating about what's happened in the past and thoughts of worrying about what is going to be happening in the future. And mindfulness is a wonderful way of bringing us into the here and now, which stops both of those things from happening. However, unless you are living in a cave in the wilderness without the day-to-day worries of paying bills, working, children, and managing all the life stress that happens, mindfulness on its own is not enough to reduce stress in the long run. In fact, you might find as you start a mindfulness practice that your stress gets worse. As I've said, mindfulness is wonderful for calming us down and bringing us into the present moment. And the trouble is that if you are someone who is on the go all the time, you're constantly in a stress cycle, as soon as you start to calm that down by being mindful, you create space for all of your internal stuff to start popping up and coming to the fore. And if you don't have the tools to deal with that, being mindful of it is not going to help you because you're mindful of it and it's still there. And I speak from personal experience with this. I spent years keeping myself very, very busy, which was a wonderful distraction from having to deal with my inner chatter and my inner thoughts and my imposter and my feelings of not being good enough and all of those things that were very much hidden by being on the go all the time. And it wasn't until I hit an episode of burnout and was literally forced to stop that I became mindful of the inner chatter and I realized I had to do something about it. So the inner work happens and the self-development work happens when you are able to sit with your thoughts and then have some way of starting to work through them. Like I've said, most people don't know how to do this. We're not taught this. We're told to keep busy, go shopping, we distract, we numb, we do all sorts of things to avoid this. So this is where mindfulness can kind of be appealing, and then you start doing it and think, no, I'm all good. Actually, thanks. I don't want to deal with all of this stuff because you don't know how to. So I'm going to share today a bit more about what's the next step once we become mindful of something. How do we go about changing it? So I'm going to share an example. It's a very personal example for me. And that was when I had my episode of burnout and I was literally forced to stop and I started to listen to what was going on internally for me. I realized a lot of my behavior was being driven by a deep-seated belief that if I don't work, I don't earn money. And I had myself working 7 days a week, as many hours of the day as I could. I was doing everything myself in my photography business. And it wasn't until I was literally forced to stop that I had to reevaluate the whole thing. And the way I did that was becoming aware of that belief I was holding and becoming aware of the thoughts and feelings that that belief was really driving. And what was underneath that belief of if I don't work, I don't earn money, because on its own as a statement, who cares? underneath that was a deep fear of not being able to care for myself financially, of not being able to take care of myself, of not being able to be independent. And it was very frightening for me. So I had to learn to sit with that fear and then start to take action to do something to alleviate it. And this is where this mindfulness isn't enough piece comes in. Being mindful of a fear and acknowledging a belief you've got, super. Now what? So what I had to do in order to not only tackle this belief, but change it, shift it, and move my life forward so I wasn't being ruled by it, and it had me in complete workaholic mode, was the following. So the first thing I did was I got some help with this. Like I said, we are not taught to deal with our own inner stuff. And for me, this was hiring a business coach and getting some external objective feedback on where I could make changes in my business so I wasn't working 24/7. This also involved doing quite a lot of mindset work around what had set up the belief, why I was so afraid, what was I afraid of, and how could we make changes to be able to alleviate this fear. The next thing I did was to set clear financial goals. This fear and this belief was being very much driven by worry about money. And at that time in my life, and we're going back to 2016 here, I had no idea about what money I was earning. I had no goals. I had no savings. I had no financial empowerment of any description whatsoever. So I started to have a look at how much money do I need to earn each month to cover my expenses and make a profit. Guess what, folks? If you run your own business, you're allowed to make a profit. And that's the whole point. Why we shouldn't really be here just to work to pay bills. There's more to life than that. And I started to look at how much money, what were my financial goals for the month, the year. I started to have a look at how much time I wanted to spend working, and then I priced my work based on the time factor and my money goal factor, not what everybody else was doing, not based on what will people pay. Oh my goodness. So we turned it on its head and started to really shift the way I was looking at money, which started to soothe the fear of not being able to take care of myself, because I started to take control of what was happening with the money. I took a break from work, which was forced by the burnout mostly, but I stopped for a couple of weeks. I stopped working for a couple of weeks, and guess what? Didn't end up bankrupt or homeless. Sometimes when we're carrying beliefs and sometimes when we have thoughts, we need to challenge them. And when we challenge them and that fear or the thought or the belief doesn't come to life, it starts to retrain our brains that actually this is a completely invalid fear because it didn't come to life. Most of our worries and fears are things that are never going to happen. So it's learning to challenge them. And a lot of that is things like CBT tools are really, really useful. I do a lot of thought work with my coaching clients. We need a toolkit to deal with these things that come up for us. Just acknowledging them is not enough. I started to also address the stress I was having that had been, you can acknowledge that with your mindfulness, but then we need to know, what do we do with it? So meditation is a wonderful thing to train your brain to calm its stress response down. That's where being mindful is really useful. And then emotional regulation tools are really good to help you learn how to calm your stress response when it's activated. And I also put boundaries down around my time. I learned to say no. So again, there were a bunch of action steps that had to happen in order to deal with the thoughts and feelings I had uncovered. And I got clear on my life goals and exactly why I was working to earn the money that was stressing me out so much. Because at that point in time, I'd been in complete survival mode. And you know what? That's no fun. And the value of mindfulness is starting to acknowledge when we're in a mode like that. And then we go to, what action do I need to take to shift this? So to sum up with this, mindfulness led me to far greater self-awareness. I think that is where it is a brilliant tool. When we slow down and we start to listen to what's happening internally and we become mindful of our inner chatter, we can start to have a look at, I notice there's a recurring pattern here. I notice I've got a thought that keeps coming up here. And I notice when that thought comes up, it brings with it a feeling of anxiety or a feeling of worry or a feeling of fear. And then the real work happens with the action you take based on what the mindfulness has brought to your conscious awareness. This is a big part of what I do as a coach. And this is a big reason why I'm so passionate about coaching. It's why I have become a coach. It's why I get coached, because it's just so powerful to take the inner knowledge you have and then do something with it that is going to improve your life. So mindfulness is just the beginning. The real work happens when you start to use the mindfulness to drive positive change in your life. So I hope this has been a helpful episode for you. As always, I'd love to hear from you. If you'd like to connect with me, you can find me on Instagram at Emma O'Brien Coach, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you've enjoyed it, please share with your friends and be sure to leave me a 5-star rating and review, especially if you're listening on Apple Podcasts. To find out more about my one-on-one coaching, please visit my website, which is emmaobriencoach.com. And remember, folks, when life gives you lemons, you can always choose another fruit. See you next time.